Homelabs are like snowflakes. Each one is unique and different in its own way, and while they serve a similar purpose, the gear and design are distinctive to the person who built it. I've tapped a few of my YouTube friends and colleagues to join me on this video to share what we're running in our Homelabs to give you an idea of the amazing spectrum of different hardware and software you can run, because there's no right or wrong way to build a Homelab. Let's get to it.
All right, I will go first. Behind me is my Homelab. And this Homelab serves two purposes for me. First is, it is where all of the YouTube stuff that I do with my co-creator John happen and get stored and transferred between our homes for editing. All that stuff, it's all stored and run out of here. And also, my Homelab is where I learn and play and test and do all the stuff that I want to experiment on that I can then take and make myself better professionally. It's like a huge valuable resource like that. Anyway, let's talk about what I've got running and go from there. So at the top here is my Ubiquiti USW Pro aggregation switch. That switch is such an awesome switch, but it is stupid expensive. 28 ports of SFP plus 10 gig, which obviously I'm using mostly. And it's got 4 ports of SFP 28, which would be awesome to use someday. That's a future state when I can buy more cards and optics for everything. Moving down, I've got a pass through that I pass all my ugly twin ax and fiber cables through. Next is my Sophos SG330 Frankenstein firewall. It's not running Sophos. It's not doing anything like that. I actually bought it and turned it into a pfSense firewall, and it runs so well like that. I made a video about it. I upgraded it when I got it, put an i7 CPU in it, and it's just standard Intel. Like all of the network ports and everything are Intel 5, so it's fully supported by pfSense and it works great. Even got the LCD display to work, which is awesome. Moving down is what I call my top of rack switch. This is just a USW Pro 28 port, non-PoE version, because it's where I dump all my 1 gig connections that I have in here, and there's quite a few, right? I've got runs that run out to the rest of the house and go to other switches that connect to and inject PoE for Wi-Fi APs and that kind of stuff. And just, this is where everything at 1 gig comes, and then I move it out from there. And there's, you can imagine in a Homelab rack, all of the servers have ILO ports and these things that need to be plugged in by 1 gig. So that's a pretty well-used switch. Another pass through. I hope to change it out someday for something more coupler-like to make it a little pretty, but it's a Homelab. It's meant to be torn apart and put back together. Anyway, let's talk about servers. Servers. Okay. This guy on top here is basically my center hub for all things storage. It's a dual socket box. It's got 2 E5 2680B4 CPUs, and now it is just running true NAS scale. All 12 of these bays up front are 14 terabyte SATA disks, and so it is now where I put everything. That's like all the data's in there, YouTube stuff's in there, personal life stuff's in there, videos, and maybe some R's and plexes are in there. Just saying. Anyway. And it's also my iSCSI target for my virtualization, which I'll get down to in a second. And those are running off NVMEs. And yeah, it's just, you can't beat Supermicro stuff. It's just fantastic. It's just hardware. It just works. It's a good gear. Next, this guy here is off. It used to be where all of this was just for storing 2GuysTech YouTube data. And I moved all the data up to this big guy up here and got everything in there stored and running, and then shut that guy down, and now it needs to find a new home because I wanted to cut my electrical bill and get rid of 2 PSUs, so I did. And then lastly down here, this guy here is my virtual host. This is a ESXi cluster it's a 2-node system. So there's an A node and a B node, and they split these drives. These drives are not populated because I am running everything off iSCSI off of this guy on top, but there are dual socket sleds in here. Both are E5 2680B4 CPUs as well. And those two together are the cluster runs all my virtualization for basically everything I do. So, I have VMs that run Docker and Portainer and that kind of stuff, and they're running as virtual machines that can be moved around. And so all of that all my compute is right here. Compute and then storage up here, and that's it. And then lastly down here, which is a little harder to see, is my Synology NAS. And I use this specifically for backing up everything above. Synology's enterprise backup software is, in my opinion, literally the best thing you can get, and it's free. So you don't have to worry about spending licensing to buy Veeam or something like that to back up your virtual machines. This guy will back up computers. It backs up all the computers in the house. It backs up all the virtual machines, all the data that's up in here. And so it's just full of 8 terabyte SATA disks. And yeah, and down the bottom, what you can't see is just an APC 2200 volt amp UPS that's basically running all this stuff as 20 amp. That's it. This is my Homelab. Thanks for watching.
Hey everybody, Chris from CrosstalkSolutions here, and in my Homelab, I like to keep everything nice and simple. All of my virtual machines and Docker containers are on my Synology NAS, which is an older model DS1520+. Mostly my NAS is used for storing my data and managing my backups, but I do run both Synology's Virtual Machine Manager as well as their Docker application. Synology's Virtual Machine Manager is super easy to use, and if I need to spin up a new server to test something out, it is a great go-to option. The only downside is that it does take away from the memory of the NAS, so I can't create anything too beefy since the NAS itself only has 8 gigs of RAM total. But I do use it to run Home Assistant in production, and that works very well. I do have a few other virtual machines that I keep powered off until I need them, such as TP-Link's Omada controller. I've got a base Ubuntu 20.04 Linux server, as well as another server that I was using to test out some broadcasting software. I primarily use Docker for testing server containers. I do have a production open speed test in one of those containers, and as you can see here, I've also been experimenting with having a Docker Cloudflare connector as well as Home Assistant, which is actually funny because ultimately I ended up just using the Cloudflare plugin within Home Assistant within the Synology Virtual Machine Manager to manage that Cloudflare tunnels connection. Finally, I'll say that just out of laziness, I haven't switched out some of my other Raspberry Pi servers that would be better suited as virtual machines or Docker containers. Specifically, if you want to run something like Pi-hole or AdBlock Home, those are great use cases for virtualization. For my business, we have a ton of virtual machines, but they don't run here in my Homelab. We use Vultr and DigitalOcean servers for many different purposes, including free PBX phone systems, our custom PBX administration platform, FTP backups, Zabbix and Grafana for server monitoring, Mastodon, Ansible. The list goes on and on. There's basically no limit to what you can do with virtualization.
So this Homelab has been set up over the course of the past 5 or 6 years now, to the point where I upgraded to this big rolling rack. And it starts off with my patch panel, goes down to a MikroTik 10 gig switch, which I upgraded to in the last year or so when I needed more speed. I have a Home Assistant up here that controls all my home automation. I have a Philips Hue hub for my lighting, and I forget what's in the middle here. I think there used to be a cable modem, but now I have fiber. Just about a month ago I got fiber, which is amazing. Then I have a little neat patch hiding a bunch of cable mess. I have a QNAP switch here that's 2.5 gig that does PoE plus, so I can run an AP that does more than a gigabit upstairs, which is cool. Then I have 4 Raspberry Pis running a bunch of Docker containers, a couple of them bare metal, running all my network services and monitoring. You can hear my kids upstairs and my wife finishing dinner. Then I have a main NAS right here and my backup NAS here that gets a nightly backup. And that backup gets sent off to Amazon S3 Glacier Deep Archive every week. So I have 3 backups of all my important data. Then I have a Storinator, which is not running right now because A, it takes a lot of power, and B, it's super loud, and the kids, as you can see, play down here. And then I have my UPS. So my Homelab is mostly bare metal with a few Docker containers for certain things, mostly so that I can test them easier locally when I'm developing for them. But I'm going to be revamping this quite a bit when I get into my new office space, and I'm vlogging about that over on JeffGeerling, so check it out.
My Homelab contains a hodgepodge of random different things, and as I list them, a common theme is probably going to be you thinking that dude really doesn't need all that stuff. And don't worry, I 100% agree with you. So let's start with networking. At the heart of my system is a Netgate SG4100, and it runs pfSense, obviously, but the rest of my network runs off of UniFi. I know, big no-no, mixing UniFi and pfSense, but I'm kinky like that. I have a random assortment of switches and access points, and honestly, it's not super interesting, so let's move on to the cool stuff, my servers. My main server houses an EPYC 7302, which is a 16-core, 32-thread processor, and I have 128 gigabytes of RAM in there. It's pretty much a beast, especially for my needs. I run Proxmox on it, and then I virtualize TrueNAS, which is my main NAS system, and on there I have like 3 pools, the largest being I think 72 terabytes, as well as a full flash storage pool that I use to edit all of my stuff off of. Other things I'm running on there is a VM for Plex, a VM that runs directly through my PIA client so that I can use it to download, seed legally obtained media. Then a couple of random VMs for Windows and Mac OS and maybe some gaming ones. Then a dedicated Docker VM on which I am running Portainer. It houses various things like a Minecraft server, actually 2 of them, a sync thing to move my files between there and my backup server, as well as my main PC, an RStack for acquiring recipes, an Nginx load balancer, a Homer dashboard, and Uptime Kuma. My next system is again running Proxmox, but this is my backup server, and I'm not running Proxmox backup server, I'm just running regular Proxmox, and I just house all of my virtual machine backups on there just in case my main server goes down. I have the VMs backed up directly to there and I can just spin them up super easily. The only other thing I'm really running on there is a single LXC container that runs Docker for the sync thing instance. Then I have a random test server that I'm probably gonna decommission later because I honestly don't really use it. If I'm testing something, I just use one of the random PCs that's sitting under my desk right now. Then I have a 3-node Kubernetes cluster that's running off of 3 different Intel NUCs. And I set this up about a year or so ago just to test out Kubernetes. I'm not really running too much on there. I'm running my main website, a couple of random projects that I'm working on, as well as a Nextcloud instance, and all of that is being stored via Longhorn, which is a pretty cool way to have high availability storage within a Kubernetes cluster. Check it out if you're a glutton for punishment. But that's soon to be replaced with a 3-node Proxmox cluster with 3 dedicated nodes that will be highly available and house a virtualized K3s cluster that will also be highly available. Oh, and it's running Ceph. So as if Kubernetes wasn't paying enough, then let's introduce Ceph to that. I'm sure this will go great. And some other random stuff I have in the rack are my Synology system, which is a 1U Synology RS822 Plus. I really like the Synology ecosystem, so I have that running in there backing up my real-time NVMe drive from my main TrueNAS server, which is what I edit off of, so at least I'm getting some use out of it. Then I have a Triplite KVM, which makes connecting to all my servers in there and debugging something in front of my rack so much easier. Speaking of Triplite, I also have 2 Triplite LCD 1500 UPSs. So yeah, that's what's running in my server rack. Things have come and gone over the years, and if you ask me to tell you what's in it in a month from now, it's probably going to be different, but I enjoy it. I spent too much money on it, but hey, it is what it is.
Let's start with the firewall. pfSense is what makes the most sense to me. They have great documentation, a very flexible platform, lots of VPN options, lots of configuration options. It's never let me down. Been a really solid system for a number of years. Next, let's talk about hypervisors. XCP-ng, which is fully open source and based on a Xen hypervisor, and I complement that with Xen Orchestra, also an open source orchestration tool, both put together by the Vates company, and they are absolutely amazing for creating a large scale, very flexible hypervisor platform to run all of your virtual machines on. Now to store them, TrueNAS is generally my go-to. I really like TrueNAS, both scale and core, 2 different platforms, but one TrueNAS open source system that really has a lot of flexibility when it comes to storage and of course the backing of ZFS. But I'll also use a little bit of Synology as well. They really do have a place in the lab. They offer you a lot of flexibility as well and a lot of turnkey options that I really enjoy in the home lab and even in the business world. Finally, Wi-Fi and network gear. I go with Unify. It's a solid platform. I've been using it for a number of years, and I've never seen a company make VLANs easier. Their Wi-Fi access points are reasonably priced. Their switches are reasonably priced, combined with an easy self-hosted platform, allowing you to keep all of your cloud at home. I really go with Unify for a lot of my networking gear. It just works really well.
I love the fact that there are just so many different choices in terms of hardware and software to run in a home lab, and just the sheer variety of different configuration options out there. And speaking of that, I would love to see what your home lab looks like, so consider joining our Discord and sharing your lab with us. Thank you so much to Chris from CrosstalkSolutions, JeffGeerling, RaidOwl, and of course Tom Lawrence for taking the time to share clips of their home lab setups. I put links in the description to their YouTube channels in case they're new to you. I doubt they are. Go check out their content and subscribe because they're phenomenal creators. And that will do it for this video. Throw us a sub and a like if you found the video interesting, or if you have a beef with anything I've said here, leave it in a comment below. Special thank you to our YouTube members. You guys are awesome. If you'd like to help support Two Guys Tech, consider becoming a member or buy some swag. It all helps. And now that you finished watching this video, why not check out our playlist over here of other great home lab and virtualization videos we've done in the past. If you're looking to get into home lab, virtualization, or self-hosting, we can help.